Hey there and welcome. So tonight for dinner we are making chickpea curry with yams, and this is the simplest curry recipe that I have up my sleeve. And so using chickpeas that we cooked from scratch, I had previously frozen some. So I've got a big batch on hand here so that I don't have to repeatedly think about soaking them and cooking them. And yeah, really recommend just the baggy method and having a couple different kinds of beans on hand. Tend to eat way more beans and then dinner's ready like much more quickly than having to do all the soaking and cooking. Right, so let's go over ingredients. Super simple. Chickpeas, or if you have canned, then just use one like 14 or 15 ounce can of chickpeas, can of coconut milk, use the full fat stuff, one medium-sized yam or sweet potato, of course onion and ginger, essential for curries. Curry powder, I'll talk a little bit more about that, but just choose your favorite one, it's fine. I've got some greens from the garden, so about half of a bunch, like when you buy them in the bunch at the grocery store, you want to do about half a bunch of greens, whether it's kale or chard, or if you're doing spinach, you could probably do a whole bunch of spinach depending on the size of it. You could use arugula, you could use mustard greens. So this is really a great recipe that you can kind of like load up with greens because they wilt into the creamy sauce and you get a lot more vegetables in it than it seems. And so, and then just for garnish, cilantro. So super basic. Sometimes when we're looking at curry recipes, it can seem intimidating because there's a really long list of ingredients. And given most of those ingredients are spices, right? So by just using a curry powder that is pre-mixed that you bought, you are saving quite a bit of time there. So I'll go on about that. But if you are cooking along, just the only equipment that you're going to need is a reasonably heavy bottom, like medium-sized pot. And this is enough to feed about a family of 4. So if you are serving this over rice, and I recommend you do, then you could have a second pot with your rice on, or get the 1 cup of rice or 1.5 cups of rice in your rice cooker and push on right about now, because that will time out perfectly with your yam curry. So to start out, just like most beautiful things in the kitchen, we're going to start out with some oil or fat. I'm using coconut oil because it goes well with the flavors. We've already got coconut fat in the canned coconut, so why not? And so a good scoop of coconut oil, but use whatever cooking oil you have around. And this is a very heavy bottomed pot. Let me move you over a little bit so you can see better. There we go. This is a very heavy bottom pot and it takes quite a while for the temperature to come up. So I'll keep my eye on that and make sure that I'm not burning the oil while I'm chopping the onion. Oh, hopefully this onion's not too strong. I did a cooking video recently where my daughter came and gave me some sunglasses during the video because she remembered that I cried so bad cutting an onion the other day. She thought those sunglasses would help, and they did. Actually, they really did help. So onion is so essential for most cuisines, and this kind of a curry from India is like super essential that you've got onions. I know my husband is not much of a cook. You could say he's a very basic cook, but he always avoids cooking with onions just because it's painful. And I know it's painful, but it's worth it. It is the foundation of flavor for almost every single dish. And they also are super healthy and affordable. So yeah, onions. Right, I'm going to quickly pop them into this pot that's just at a medium heat while I get my ginger going on here. So I am going to cry a little bit. If you're cooking along with me, we can cry together. Right, so ginger, I buy organic ginger, and so I don't bother peeling it. If you want to peel it, you can do the trick where you take a spoon and kind of use it to peel instead of using a peeler or a knife. And then the other trick I have is that I just use a grater, a box grater, for my ginger. And it saves loads of time from mincing ginger. You want to do a couple tablespoons or so. Usually measure, my measurements are not exact, but palm of your hand, and you pop it in with the onion. So I've got these going. And I'm not gonna waste too much time here. So in between steps, like while my onion and ginger are sauteing, I can start chopping the next thing. So yam is so wonderfully versatile. It can go in a lot of different cuisines, just as like a sweet vegetable filler, I guess. You could use squash cubes. So if you had a butternut squash around, for example, you could use the neck of the squash. You would just peel it and then cut it into cubes. And you want the cubes to be about as thick as your thumb. That's 1 inch cube, so like that. Do not need to be perfectly square. I don't get too wrapped up about having perfect knife skills. But if you do them reasonably consistently, then they'll cook at the same time, and that's really what matters here. So when I cut my yams, you'll notice, to take a second for a nice skills lesson, I cut them kind of in half so that they're a manageable size. And then I cut them into planks this way, right? So I've got kind of like boards. And then I take them, you can stack them if you want, and cut them into planks that way. Once you get comfortable with your knife skills, then cooking from scratch is so much easier. So then you've got these kind of really big chunky batons. And then you can line those up and chop them into your squares. So I know sometimes when you look at a vegetable that's cylindrical or odd shaped, the recipe tells you to get cubes out of it. Sometimes it can really make you squint and go, I wonder how I'm going to get cubes out of that. I kind of treat it like it's a piece of lumber. So you are cutting big swaths first to make boards, and then you cut across to make like planks, and then you cut them across again to make tiles. When I'm teaching knife skills, I kind of use the tree analogy. This seems to work. So my onion and garlic, you can see they're still really affecting my eyes. I wish you could smell it too. So good. It already smells like dinner is on its way, and people are going to be starting to get hungry. This should only take a few more minutes. So at this point, you add your spice. The thing with adding spice is that pretty much any dried spice should be added towards the beginning of cooking, when you have fat in the pan and when you've got a little bit of heat going, your onions have already started to simmer. Then you add your spice, and this releases a lot of the natural oils and flavors in the curry spice. If you find yourself making curries at home and you're kind of bored of that, just switching brands of curry powder or switching varieties. I went to a kitchenware shop and I found a whole wall of different curry mixes. And so making them yourself is also wonderful. If you have a stocked spice pantry, you can learn how to make lots of different curry mixes yourself, including like a Jamaican like jerk spice kind of mix, or Ethiopian Berber spice. Also, it's all within the realm of curry. It's really just spice mixes. A lot of them use like cumin and coriander and turmeric as kind of the base, and then they have different variances from there. This one is a pretty basic Madras curry, and it's medium spicy, so I put in half a tablespoon for 1 pot of curry. And for my family's tolerance, which is pretty low, that seems to work. But every brand is a little bit different. Okay, so this is at a point now, I'm going to bring you over here, where I can add the liquid. And the liquid, well, it's actually semi-solid, is coconut milk. And then you could add, and then you do add a little bit of water too. So before the spices catch on the bottom, I don't want any burning happening. Then I will make sure I add my liquid. This is really nice and thick coconut milk, which is fantastic. It's got a high fat content. Just a tip, like if you're buying coconut milk, don't buy the light stuff, because really you're just paying for more water in the can. Just get the rich stuff and add more water if it feels too rich for you. It's definitely more economical that way. So I'm going to add a can of water to my can of coconut milk. And then just to make this happen a little faster, I'm going to pop the lid on it to trap that heat in. Oh, chickpeas. Right, of course. We're going to add some chickpeas. So these are the chickpeas that I had previously frozen. I was shaking equivalent to a can, so it's about 1.5 cups of chickpeas. And keeping the rest of these frozen, just throw them back in the freezer and they will be there for you when you need them. So this is the protein in our dish. So good. When they simmer with the coconut oil, the coconut fat and the curry, then it absorbs a lot of that flavor. And you could put your salt in now. It's actually best to season during cooking instead of all at the end. So we'll start with about a teaspoon of salt, and then I'll let my taste be my guide once this is all cooked and the flavors are coming together. Now, I tried to make this with as few ingredients as possible and then still be like nutritious and flavorful and complete. If you wanted just for a little more depth of flavor, you could put a couple tablespoons of tomato paste in here, or you could put a few fresh tomatoes if you had them around. Sometimes adding that like acidic balance can really help the flavors of your curry pop. So yeah, add a tomato product if you want, but I think it's optional. Especially if you're serving this with some sort of chutney, like a mango chutney or something, then you get a little bit of an acidic pop there too. I just served it with a little wedge of lime, and that was good for my family. We were happy with that. So just keeping it really simple for a weeknight meal. So you could see what I was doing there. It's like unzipped all of the kale. So the kale comes with pretty tough stalks. I eat a lot of veggies, but I am not tough enough to eat these stalks. So I compost those. And the rest of them, just looking at the leaves, making sure, because these came straight from my garden, making sure that they're nice and clean. They're not grocery store kale. Yeah, I'm going to give them a quick rinse. Make sure there's an extra rinse there. Okay. And then for these greens, this is flat leaf kale, so it's really easy to just put it in a pile like that. I'm going to fold it over on itself and make a bundle. And then you can cut it. I think it was a little more on the tough side as far as greens go. Some people, it can be an acquired taste to love it, but really it's in the same family as broccoli. Like, it is a really delicious vegetable, and it's a little bit bitter, so it actually goes really well with the curry because the curry is sweet and fatty and delicious. So it kind of takes the bitter edge off of the kale. If for an even more mild greens, then use spinach. I think most folks, especially people with kids who might be a little bit on the picky side, who might actually pull pieces of kale out, spinach might be a good option if you have someone in your family who's a little bit picky about greens. So I'm gonna let that simmer for a few minutes until the yams are tender, and then I'll come back for the last step and for plating it up. So 10 minutes. Okay, about 10 minutes in real time has elapsed, and we've got our yams boiling away. I just tested one and it was tender. So now you can put your greens in. You don't want to overcook your greens. So just a couple minutes until they kind of wilt in there is all that it needs. Spinach will take less time, kale kind of in the middle, something like collards, which is like much more firm, will take a couple more minutes. But you don't need to really cook the heck out of them. They're already melting in there. So some of this residual heat will finish cooking them. So as you can see, this is a really saucy curry, so it really is meant for putting over rice. But sometimes I'll have it just kind of as a soup on its own without the rice. It's totally up to you, or any other grain. Sometimes we forget about the other grains, but this would be really lovely over a bowl of millet or something like that. Right, okay, and the most important part is tasting. No, sometimes we just get into like the mechanical action of doing the recipe and paying attention to what it says to do next and stuff. And we forget to taste it. Okay, so the amount of salt that I put in was good. It was about a teaspoon. To my taste, that's working well. And I'm tasting kind of a medium heat, which means for my family, they're gonna go, oh, it's so spicy. So we would put it over rice, and usually my kids put a dollop of yogurt over top of my curries too, because I don't put the spice levels at the basement. I put them somewhere in the middle just so that my kids can get used to new flavors and eventually build up their tolerance to liking spicy food, because then they're so versatile and they can eat food from everywhere and they can go over to anyone's house and love what's for dinner. So it's important for me that they're exposed to lots of different flavors. Okay, and last, so this kale is already cooked. It's already nice and wilted in there. I'm gonna dish one up here. I'll do one without rice just so you can see it a little bit closer. And something I didn't mention is I'm all about substitutions. I think substituting is such an important, learning how to substitute is such an important skill, so that you're not in a panic mid-dinner realizing you don't have an ingredient and needing to leave the house. So I wanted to mention that some substitutions for yam, you could do, I mentioned squash, but you could also do carrots. Any of those orange vegetables are just really nice, like sweet addition. You could also do parsnips because they're sweet, they're root vegetables, why not? Or you could do potatoes. So the idea is just to get like a nutritious vegetable into the dish and something that kind of like thickens it. So here's our curry. I'm gonna add a little bit of cilantro to it. Or quite a bit. There we go. So dinner on the table in about 20 minutes, about the same amount of time it takes to cook the rice. This curry will be ready. So hopefully you've got something extra up your sleeve for dinner time inspiration. Take care.